We're going to start off doing something maybe a little different for the beginning of one of these. I'm going to set a timer. What I'm going to ask of you for this 60 seconds is use that time maybe to breathe if you're kind of separating from the intro. Maybe you have that like last Slack message that you were trying to bang out in the in-between time. Feel free to do that. Kind of do what you need to do in order to kind of feel present for this meeting of a sort that we're about to do together. So that is going now. All right, that concludes that 60 seconds. I find that's a nice little practice to do at the beginning. It's a thing we'll talk about in a moment. What we're going to do to start off is I've got some slides I'm going to run you all through that are kind of about some things I've learned along the way, doing facilitation on distributed meetings, both through doing podcast hosting as well as being a part of a facilitation guild at a remote first company. So I'm going to go ahead and start a screen share for that. I promise you it's not too long and too dry. Whoop, did not mean to move that forward just yet. Getting my notes up. Can I get a verbal confirmation from someone that I've indeed shared a slideshow that says facilitate your distributed meetings, blah, blah, blah?
Yep, I can see it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Just want to make sure I'm not sharing the different browser window or something, as can happen with these things. So let's go ahead and get started. So as mentioned, my name is Ryan Cook. I'm a co-captain of Code for Chicago and the host of a podcast called Civic Tech Chat. Today, I'm going to try to share some things about facilitation. And then once we've gotten through that part, we're going to do a little live Civic Tech Chat taping, which I think should be some fun as well. And then we'll try to also have some time for questions and whatnot that you might have as we go. So to get us started, we're going to kind of do this in a way it's like before the meeting, during the meeting, and then after the meeting, as far as these tips that we're going to try to talk through, as if it were kind of a story of a sort. So today we're going to start with before the meeting. And the first point here is perhaps the most important thing about facilitating a meeting. And that's knowing why you're even meeting to begin with. I know it sounds like a very base thing, but I can't tell you the number of meetings I've been in where it's just sort of a collection of folks that get together and we don't really know why we're there. And you end up having these sort of conversations that go in circles, or maybe someone had a thing that they wanted to bring up and it starts a whole series of interactions. And the reason why it's important is, for one, to avoid that scenario, but also informs all of the rest of the questions you need to answer for your planning. Like, for example, trying to figure out like what your desired outcomes are. It also serves as the anchor for your agenda when you get to the point that you're constructing that, as all of your agenda items should really be rooted in that same why. And it also, as the meme here kind of talks about, some meetings should be emails. It kind of informs you whether or not this is really a meeting or if it's just like a Slack to inform some people or an email that could be sent. After you have an idea of why you want to do this meeting, you also want to figure out who needs to be present, which is not always so easy on the face of it. A lot of things you have to ask yourself involve things like, hey, is this meeting about making a decision? Is it about collecting views? Is it about exploring an issue very deeply? If it's to make a decision, then one of the things you need to do is make sure that all stakeholders that are required for that decision to be firm are there. For example, at my work, we have cross-functional teams where there's like a product person, there's software engineers, there's a designer or two that are kind of embedded together. And one of the requirements we have is we're going to make a decision about what we work on. We need representation from all three practices. We call it like the triad. So if I'm going to schedule a meeting for this group, I want to make a decision, I would ensure that at least those representatives are there to get that consensus. You might also consider, are there people with unique expertise that you can bring in? If you're working on a product and there's part of it that some person has special experience with, probably should invite them, even if it's not like obvious at first that they're directly involved. And then lastly, you should think about folks that are impacted by the decisions you're about to make. Are there stakeholders out there, if you kind of consider your stakeholder map for what you're working on, that maybe would be interested in hearing about this that you don't think of on that initial thought? And then last on this slide, really want to think about what do you want from this meeting? What's the deliverable? Is it a decision to be made? Is it an exploration? And if it's an exploration or a conversation, are there artifacts that you can get out of that? Maybe in the case of designing, building a product, you're trying to come up with a design together as a group. Maybe a design document is an example of an artifact. Or the artifact can even just be notes from the meeting if you're just trying to kind of get information together, but have an idea of what that thing is before the meeting starts. Next, I would suggest you consider how you schedule your meetings, especially on a distributed platform like Zoom or something. And one thing I would definitely say about that is don't schedule your meetings continuously for more than an hour, unless you're going to have a sizable break in between and break it up. You're really going to lose folks' attention span after 60 minutes. I would at least have a 10-minute break, 10 or 15 minutes, and then you can go back into it if it's something that requires a lot of time. But really giving that allows people to mentally reset, allows them to kind of be present again. I don't know about y'all, but when I'm on a Zoom call for more than an hour, I just start to kind of mentally check out. And if you're talking about important stuff, that's really not what you want from folks. And related to that, you should really consider how long do you actually need to have this conversation. This is kind of like a calendar courtesy thing. If you don't really need an hour to talk about a thing, it's a quick sync up and decide. Schedule a meeting for less than that. You can also use it as a tactic in order to kind of apply a time pressure to a conversation you have if you want to make sure that something's decided. But we can talk about tactics a little bit later as we go. Also, it's very important that you make an agenda beforehand, even if it's something kind of informal, like some scratchings on a Google Doc. This is important because you really want your meetings to have some amount of structure and flow. And you want that structure to really reflect why you're getting together to talk to begin with. It's really easy to have something kind of go off on a tangent, and then you don't end up getting that deliverable that we talked about earlier. So having this agenda ahead of time, for one, gives you a guideline that you can lean on as you're facilitating, but also lets your participants know ahead of time what you're trying to get to so that they can prepare and they are ready with what they need in order to participate in a way that makes sense. And you can also use your agenda as a way to start thinking about how you're going to manage time. If you have multiple sections or multiple topics you need to cover, you can start to come up with ratios. Maybe the first 20 minutes we can devote to topic A, the next 20 minutes to B, and let's make sure we have 10 minutes at the end to make sure that we can assign action items to folks. You can kind of start to come up with that flow. And then last on this slide, really consider your setting. One thing I've observed in my time is that maybe it's less so right now, since I imagine pretty much most meetings are remote right now. But before the COVID times, there were situations where folks might have hybrid meetings where you'd have some folks remote, you'd have folks in a conference room. And what I remember from that experience is that if you're the person that's dialed in and everybody else is in the conference room, it's a really frustrating experience. You don't know who's talking. You might not be able to hear them if they don't have a good conference system, like one of those fancy ones in the middle of the table, or one of those smart board type things that's designed for meetings. So I'd really suggest that if you're gonna have folks on a distributed basis in your meeting, just make the whole meeting distributed so that everyone has a consistent experience. it really helps make sure you're getting all the voices you need heard if you can make sure that everyone kind of has the same quality level there. And then let's talk about what goes on during the meeting. One of the things that I think is really helpful is to try to do something to set a tone or to kind of give space for folks to get present at the beginning of the meeting. One example of that is what I did at the beginning of this one. I set a timer and kind of allowed folks to have space to breathe or kind of figure out like how they can kind of transition from what they were doing to having this conversation. This is great, especially because I don't know how it is for a lot of you work, but there's sometimes folks that have these like back to backs, and maybe you're like their third in a row, and it's just helpful to give them a little space to breathe and kind of reset mentally, because these things can get exhausting, and it's just a nice thing to do, and it in my experience has made folks better participants. A similar sort of thing you could do that is also really good is if you've got a group that's small enough, I would suggest doing like a check-in. So that's where you would go around popcorn style and ask folks to talk about how they're feeling, whether it's like a physical sensation or an emotional state they're in. And it's pretty freeform with that. The idea is to get a baseline for where folks are going into the conversation. And I think this is especially helpful if you're doing something like a retrospective, because those are often like hard conversations. So having an idea of where everyone's at can help you then communicate effectively to them. And then also establish guidelines for interacting with the meeting. Basically like make sure it's clear like how someone's supposed to interact with it. And there's many options. So like, for example, we're on Zoom right now. So Zoom has a couple of ways you could go about managing folks that want to talk. There's that hand raise feature, which works pretty well. It's easy to engage with. The downside to it is that it's hard to track order. So if you're either just really on the ball, like watching that while you're facilitating, or you have someone to help you, that works out pretty well. What I tend to use though is the chat feature, and try to do a thing called taking stack. So that is not a concept that I came up with at all. That's a thing that comes from a lot of like community organizing things, and has some history that I don't recall off the top of my head, but I have borrowed a lot for these sorts for online meetings. Because what you could do is you can have people type like either hand or response in the chat. And what that tells you is hand is like, hey, I've got a new thought I'd like to add when I speak next. And response is like, hey, I'd like to respond to the current thread that's going on. And what that allows you to do as a facilitator is you can kind of keep a read on the energy of the conversation, how it's flowing. And you might choose like, hey, like this thread's kind of being pulled in a way that is good for the group. Maybe I should hit these responses before I go back up to that hand that was further up in the order. So being able to communicate that intent is very helpful. One thing with that is if you do decide to use the chat that way, is you need to make sure then that the chat is like somewhat clean of other things. So at that point, I'd suggest like having some sort of clear communication for like where banter type stuff can be, whether it's like a random channel or you have like a back channel. Even if you're not going to use this technique, I actually suggest having that space anyway. Because if there's one thing I think that helps out with frustrating meetings is being able to be kind of snarky with your coworkers on chat together. Gives a little levity to some things. And then also think about the way voices are being represented in your conversation. This is, I think, one of the more important responsibilities of a facilitator is that kind of community aspect of the group you're with. We've all heard that principle of like step up, step back. That's something that should always guide us as we're like engaging with these public forums. As a facilitator, you don't want like one voice to take up all the space. If you think that is something that might happen, that might actually be a good thing to bring up at the beginning of the meeting, is just, mention step up, step back as a thing. And also, if you feel comfortable with it, it's also a good idea to invite folks to give input if you're noticing that they haven't engaged. And what's really important with this is to do it from a place of compassion. You don't want to like put somebody on the spot and like ask like a question, but like, hey, do you know the answer? Like you might remember from some bad memories of primary school when you forgot to read the chapter or something. You don't want to do that. But if you know that there's like some special expertise they have or an experience they have with a thing, like if we're talking about how to solve some problem in an app. And I know like, hey, my coworker just worked on this a couple weeks ago. Maybe you can kind of like be smooth and say like, hey, like I know you've worked on this sort of thing before. Do you have any thoughts on this that you feel comfortable sharing? And then, they can always say no, but making sure that space is there is important. And then also, this might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but silence is absolutely your friend when you're a facilitator. I know like it can feel really uncomfortable, but you can use silence as a tactic to urge dialogue. If you can get yourself comfortable with that idea of asking a question and then just letting it sit out there for a while, it can be an effective thing to kind of make folks feel that urge to participate. When I put that long pause, I imagine some of you felt like a little bit of pressure in your chest, like this silence is super awkward and weird. I would like the silence to be broken. When you're in your meetings, people that will happen too, and it might inspire engagement. It also gives folks a moment to think. You're probably not going to have your most creative thoughts while you're sitting here listening to me yammer on about something. But if I pause for a moment and I give you the opportunity to collect yourself, then you might have something that you want to add kind of appear in your mind. At least that's how my brain tends to work. Continuing on with that theme of like how you use sound and tempo, the tempo of your voice can also be a tool as you're facilitating the meeting. If you're wanting to transition from, say, one topic to another, and you want to ensure that there is some time in case someone had a thing that they forgot about when you're asking questions before, but you want them to be able to interrupt you, you can slow your voice down like that. And it makes it more comfortable to be interrupted than if you're talking at a normal speed where there aren't those like opportune pauses. It's also entertaining if you point it out as you're doing it and you say something like, all right, I'm going to move on unless someone interrupts me with an important comment about what we just talked about. So you can kind of like do that. And people, my experience with it is people are generally into having fun with that, and they'll use the tool that you give them. They'll actually interrupt you and ask the question, which is what you want in that situation. With tempo, you can also kind of try to treat segments of your meeting kind of like a show in a way. When you listen to a talk show and say they're going from one guest to another or they're moving topics, there's usually some sort of like bridging comment, which you can kind of use active listening in order to figure out. So if like someone's talking to me about this pumpkin they carved, I might, say something like, oh, like, thank you for sharing that about the pumpkin you carved. It sounds like it looked really good. Speaking of which, so-and-so over here also is into pumpkin carving, and they had something to share about that. And you can kind of like find those spaces. But the idea is like really listen to what's being said, and you can take those tail ends of a comment that someone's making and use it as a bridge to a question or to calling on the next person. And it makes the experience feel more smooth and more interactive for folks that are listening. And then the last bit of what's important for during a meeting is that before the meeting ends, you should gather action items. Are there things that need to happen that folks need to get done after the meeting? And one thing that's really helpful for that is to carve out time at the end of the meeting to talk about the action items and make sure that they all have an owner. There's one thing I've learned in my professional career doing things is that if something doesn't have an owner for it to get done, it will not happen. So if you want your action items to have something happen, make sure they have someone owning them. And then let's talk about after the meeting. So after the meeting, you want to follow up on your action items. Talk to folks, make sure that they understand what's going on with them. If they have times that they need to be done by, you can do that if that's your role. Get feedback from your team from how meetings are going. Like semi-regularly ask them how the meeting experiences are. And if you're in a leadership role where you have a team, you should really check in and see how much disruption that meeting is having on their workflow. Because in that position, you maybe don't always have the view to know whether or not that's a problem, or if it's like getting in the way of things getting delivered. So getting that feedback is important. Of course, always make adjustments, always keep learning. And it's a good idea to talk to other folks that have to facilitate at your organization. If you want to go to like next level with it, you can even form a facilitation guild, which is a pretty fun kind of experience. And that is the end of the slides part. I do want to leave some space in case folks have any questions before we go into the fun civic tech chat part of this. I'm not seeing any questions. I'll also make some time I was doing the silence thing. That's a good call, Joseph. So we'll go ahead and go into the civic tech chat part for now. If we have some time after the interview is done, I'll save some space at the end if you happen to like think of something while we're going through. And hopefully you'll see some of these techniques kind of come through with this interview. And speaking of which, having an agenda beforehand, if you want to follow along with the questions that I'm going to ask these folks, you can head on over to this Google Sheet that I threw in the Zoom chat. That is my little questions draft that I'm going to be working off of. So let's go ahead and get started. We've got two special guests here with us for this Civic Tech Chat live taping here today, both from Code for Chicago. We have Cade and Joseph, and I'll have them both introduce themselves. Cade, do you want to start us off and introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for inviting us and walking us through that lecture. Or slides. I always call stuff lectures. Like Ryan said, my name's Cade. I am quite new to Code for Chicago, new to Chicago. In general, I'm originally from Oakland, California. I have a background in fine arts, visual arts, as well as civil engineering, electrical engineering, and stuff like that. And over the past year or so, I've been focusing more on user experience, user interface design, and making that transition. Should I pass it over to Joseph?
Absolutely. Joseph, would you like to introduce yourself as well and tell us a bit about what you do?
Yes, and I just want to point out, if you're wondering if Cade's thing is glitching, that's on purpose. That's intentional. So
it's on purpose. Yes.
For weeks, Cade would have that. It was annoying me so much, but it's a cool effect. I get it. Hey everyone, I'm Joseph. I'm originally from LA, so shout out Altadena. I saw you in the chat. Shout out Lakers, 2020 champions. But now I'm here, based in Chicago, right now I do some ad hoc design work with an acting studio here in Chicago called Green Shirt Studio. But before I became a designer, I used to work in the nonprofit field, specifically in foster care, mental health, and suicide prevention. I think that's my 5-point, my elevator pitch, Ryan.
I appreciate the intros at perhaps elevator pitches, as you put it, Joseph,
yes.
from each of you. Next, I want to get at why. What is each of your personal whys? That thing that drives you to get out of bed each morning to do what you do.
Oh no, Ryan, we really lost participants. I feel so bad. I hope this is not boring, everyone. I hope this will be more interesting enough people to provide you content. I'm really looking. Oh, we got one more. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Ryan. I interrupted you.
Sure thing. So I was asking about personal why, and Joseph, would you like to kick us off with that? Like, what's your personal why? The thing that drives you to get out of bed each morning.
This year or previous to 2020?
Dealer's choice there.
Dealer's choice. I think that the thing that I'm most motivated by is knowing that when I work or whenever I do something, it's always like contribute back to my family, and family has become such an important thing to me as I've gotten older, and that's pretty much kind of the reason why I do what I do. Sorry if that's cliche.
No. Nothing.
Cliche is fine by me. Kate, how about yourself?
Popcorn Kate. Okay.
For me, I think a lot about it. I did a lot of writing on it actually. Because I think kind of like what you said, Joseph, it's changing a lot. I think something that's resonated a lot in 2020 specifically for me has been growth. Personal, professional, physical, just a lot of growth in general. So I'm really thankful for that time and to continue on that growth.
So for this conversation, we're going to be diving a bit into your journey to the practice that you both have chosen to hop into, as well as a bit about what brought you into civic tech. That phrase, though, civic tech, is kind of vague, somewhat broadly defined, depending on who you talk to, or maybe narrowly defined, depending on who you talk to. So as a result, I'd be curious to hear what it means to you. So for each of you, what does civic tech mean?
So I'm speaking from my perspective, someone used to work in nonprofits and working alongside the county. Now, civic tech means to me not having Internet Explorer as your main browser. It's having everything like have some like sort of technical aspect that's not completely analog, like moving away from like using paper. That's what civic tech means to me.
Yeah, I think for me, civic tech, I look a lot about access and agency. I think coming from my work, doing a lot of civil engineering with the city of Oakland, actually, and making physical sites accessible. I'm really interested in also translating that into the digital space within like government institutions, right? Whether that be like a DMV form or like email groups for neighborhoods.
Good response.
Indeed, indeed. I'd like to talk a bit about the journey you both are on. As each of you have been trying to carve out careers in the design practice and have volunteered with us over at Code for Chicago with some of those skills. To start us off, let's kind of go back to that foundation of why again. You know, why design? What draws each of you to the practice?
For me, I come from, like I mentioned, a fine arts background. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in New Genres from the San Francisco Art Institute. San Francisco Art Institute, said that really fast. And Master of Fine Arts from Mills College. So for me, design has always been rooted in my art practice, which deals a lot with viewership. And so I'm always thinking about, you know, in that loss of viewership and coming into design and user interface, there was a lot of learning I had to do with checking my bias and as well as learning a lot about accessibility within design and really centering that within my learning process of coming to design. And yeah, just really wanting to continue on work as best I can, helping folks, right? Yeah, kind of rambled. Joseph, do you want to add anything?
Joseph. Okay, yeah. So, you know, it's interesting because when Ryan had talked to us a little bit yesterday, I hadn't thought about this in a while, but I think the journey that started for me was realizing what I enjoyed most about my job was solving problems. So an example of that was when the hurricane season was happening, I was working at a crisis line in Los Angeles. And for those that don't remember, it sucked. And all the lines they would be given to like Houston and also in Florida, those were lines that were getting impacted. And so their calls would get rolled over to us. And so usually in a crisis line, we aren't really staffed very well. There's usually like maybe like 5 to 10 people at a time. And like most of those people are volunteers. And so when you're impacted like that, you get all these calls of people like in types of suffering. And that's really hard and laborious on counselors, just hearing and not knowing you can do anything about it. And so one of the things we thought of right then and there was just trying to figure out like thinking about this problem. Like we have all these callers, how can we service most of them as much as possible? And I remember at the time, we just don't have any money. And this was also maybe like, I think 2017. And so like our solution was just to have a shared Google Doc that we put on every single computer. That way we can start sharing resources. What was happening is resources were happening within a 24-hour cycle and were being used and added constantly. And so to keep abreast of that and to keep up with the pace, that was like one solution. And kind of what it kind of drove me up to that point was realizing that what a lot of what I've been doing was like solving problems in a micro scale, whether that be working with a foster youth and helping them finding like secure housing, or whether that was like talking to someone out of like jumping off the ledge. Those were things that I was really interested in. And I think I found a lot of interest in like tech in general, because when I was younger, I used to code a lot. And so that I found myself like in the merging those two things together as I got older.
I imagine as each of you have made your way through design that you've had to learn a great deal. In the spirit of that, are there any like lessons learned as you've gone that you'd be willing to share with folks with us today?
Oh, hell yes. Do not, if you're 26 or 27 and you think you can get away with going to grad school and having you pay that out of your pocket and then convincing your wife to move with you to the other part of the country, really think twice. Really remember that some of us just don't have financial resources available to us. And you can never predict that a pandemic would hit the same year you're graduating from your grad degree. There's no way you can predict that. However, make sure you have safety nets. This goes for people that move to LA to become actors. Do not quit your job. Save some money. If you decide to change your career, please make sure you don't quit your job, because you're gonna still need to pay your rent. So that's my advice, Ryan. I don't know if that's gonna be helpful to anyone here. But yeah, make sure you really think about why you want that grad degree so much and how that would be valuable to you.
Intentions. I just did a tarot reading with one of my good friends, and she was like, you need to set more daily intentions. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're so right. Daily intentions. Think about that, how we move through space, right? For me, some of those lessons learned was patience. Patience is a virtue which I struggle with on the daily, as well as setting intentions. And reading. Lessons learned, just reading. Try to consume as much material maybe as you can, because oftentimes it's easy to fall off and go into those other habits. Yeah, tarot's fun.
In a similar theme, like that theme of learning, I imagine something that you've experienced is being a mentee or a mentor along your journey. If that's the case, have there been any things you've encountered that made you think like, oh, like this makes for good mentorship? If so, like what are those things?
Well, I actually totally forgot in space. I did General Assembly's user experience in immersive boot camp last year. And I think that's probably, I should have mentioned that. So I do have coming out of that, couple mentors from that program, and also something that they mentioned was just reach out to people. I literally cold called someone via LinkedIn that did the program, had a similar arts background as me, and we met up multiple times and talked about like our experience in this boot camp. And she really helped me kind of come out of that experience and figure out where I'm landing, right? And what's the worst that can happen if you send that message? You're left on red. Maybe it's a little hurt to the ego, but just send another one. That's how applying for jobs can be, right? Especially right now. Joseph?
This is an interesting question. I know for me, because I used in my previous career, I always found myself as like a subject matter expert, as someone who's a mentor. But now I find myself as I get older as a mentee, as I change careers. Which is great. It's just like it's opened a whole new like worldview that I never thought about before. But I remember when I was working like specifically in foster care, we had this program where we had caseloads of up to 20 teenagers, ages like 18 to 21. And our goal was to like meet with them every month to make sure that they had secure housing, that they were applying to college, and they're applying to DMV, stuff like that, like daily living skills you take for granted. Oftentimes we find when a lot of foster youth don't have those access to resources. The foster parents sometimes are not that, involved in their livelihood outside of foster care. And so that's kind of what our role. And I think I found really helpful when I was a mentor in that capacity, was really like being thoughtful about what they want and not what I want for them. I think this can also, like, if you're a parent, it's very easy to like make decisions for people that you care about. but there's nothing quite like people making their own agency and like having them make their own decisions and having them make their own mistakes. Cause I think there's a lot of value in that. And so even if it hurts, even if they're dating someone you really don't think it's a good fit for them, of course, like pending like other like salacious stuff that you should probably like take care of. If they're just a shitty person, you let them take the L on that. So I find that to be more powerful than you having to step in when things don't seem like they're going in the right direction.
Taking the L on that's an interesting thing. I think that's a good point though about folks having things reinforced by learning through failure. As mentioned earlier, you have both volunteered with our fair Code for Chicago. I'd be curious to hear, why did each of you seek to lend your skills in this civic tech space through a group like ours?
It's funny, Ryan, because when I saw this question when you posted it, when we were going through like what we'll talk about today, I had realized I had been volunteering since I was like 17, 18. And what a chump I've been this entire time. Because like I think I remember the first time I volunteered, it was like I think I might have been like still in high school. We were working at a blind institute in LA, and our job was kind of like just assist like the people that were coming in and out of the facility. And then that kind of progressed to me working with like low income children, and that progressed into me working as a suicide counselor. And so I always like, I personally, and maybe everyone here like maybe similar in terms of you're a bleeding heart and you're a fool for feeling that way. But I just like, there's always this part of me that no matter how I can get away, Ryan, I can't help but like feel like I need to make some type of contribution. And the thing I realize as I get deeper into like civic tech or even like social impact stuff, the thing you realize is you take your hero cape off because you realize there's so much in the world and there's only so much in your control that you can actually fix and help. But you find that even the small differences count. And so like, even if we provide, like, so I joined Code for Chicago when I moved to Chicago a couple of years ago. And even though it was kind of, as everyone could imagine, being part of Code for a brigade group could be tough. Because, you get a lot of volunteer turnover. Sometimes you don't get clients right away. And those are things that could be disgruntling. But like I remember one partnership we had with, I think they're called, what is the marijuana group called, Ryan? The coalition?
Oh yeah, Cannabis Equity Illinois.
Yeah,
I think.
So
yeah.
They were a nonprofit that partnered with us last year, and it was so gratifying to like help them in our little way to just help them set up a website, set up like their branding stuff. And it's like little things like that knowing that their goal is to help help me out here, Ryan. I'm losing track of what they do. They expunge records for people who were convicted with any like marijuana offenses. And so just knowing we're making small contributions like that is like really meaningful. Popcorn
yeah.
Cave. Okay.
Popcorn. Yeah, I've also been volunteering since forever. Throughout high school, it was actually a requirement in my high school that you complete a certain amount of hours of volunteering each year. Otherwise, you can graduate literally. So it's just always been instilled in me, right, to be volunteering, to be active in the community. And also it kind of makes sense to me. Like, wouldn't you want to be a part of the community you live in, right? And kind of help each other. And then just working in city in city engineering and facilitating projects, large scale, medium scale projects, seeing how that work can be transferred over. And also it's something that I just want to work in, the civic tech. So obviously it kind of makes sense in my eyes, and I think others would agree that you're going to seek out institutions, organizations, places to volunteer that you're interested in. Yeah.
To steal the words from the practice of retrospective, the idea of kind of looking back on something and trying to figure out how it went, are there any things that you'd say are things that have gone well or didn't go so well with your experiences in civic tech so far?
When you refer to this question, Ryan, you're talking about my experience working in the brigade?
Yeah, well, the brigade, or if you've involved yourself in any of the other like public interest things in general.
Popcorn Cade.
Cool, no worries. You can popcorn to me. I like popcorn. I think for me, I abstracted this a little bit larger since I'm, just probably like a month or so in with Code for Chicago and helping you guys out and volunteering. Kind of just my journey overall coming into the tech sector. Good for me has been networking. Can kind of tell I got the gift of gab and I like to talk. So going out and talking with people, that's always fun. What's been difficult, maybe not good, bad, whatever kind of moniker you want to assign to it, has been somewhat commitment. 2020, again, there's been growth in a lot of areas and stagnation in others. So just keeping kind of myself in check, setting those daily intentions, right? Manifesting that and articulating it. So all things to work on. We're all work in progress.
I feel like, Cade, you have like in front of above your monitor, you have like a mood board of the image you're trying to manifest of yourself. Is that true?
It's literally
like a cork board. 2020. That I think the thing that I find most frustrating, I might have touched upon this a little earlier, and it can't be helped. Sometimes like when we do the brigade, Ryan, it's always like disheartening when you have people feeling really engaged their first meeting. And then there's always like, they'll go to the second meeting and then they stop going after the third meeting. And that's always like disgruntling because you meet people, you connect with them, and you kind of hope that they can stay committed. I get it. It's like 2 hours of your life, at least for us in the brigade, every week. So, people have different priorities. So that's always tough. And what's also tough, Ryan, is sometimes like I feel like the projects that we end up doing, because of the nature of us providing our services for free, sometimes we don't fall in someone else's like priority list. And so like, I'm not gonna put them on blast, but there's one nonprofit we're working with in Chicago, and we had our initial scoping meeting, but now it's already been 2 weeks, and I was trying to like get something going. So the problem with that is you lose momentum with the enthusiasm like new volunteers have. And so my fear is always like, I hope you can still stay excited about this project and like push through, because we just need to talk to them one more time before we can actually start adding features or start like conceptualizing what how we want to frame this problem, et cetera. So those are things that are always in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I think those are good things to think about. That's definitely a repeated struggle I think we've had with some groups that we've had to work through. Now I know, Joseph, you gave some eerily specific sort of advice for someone making a transition, but I'm gonna kind of step over and like explore that kind of a question a bit more. And I'd be curious for both of you, if there are folks out in this audience or folks that maybe hear this not live later, that are wanting to follow along a path like yours, where they want to switch careers and say go into something like design, and maybe even do that in a civic tech space. What sort of advice would you give to them as they are starting out?
Don't go into an interview without doing any research. I know that's simple, but like I don't recall doing any research in my previous jobs before I changed careers. Other than having like a fundamental understanding of what the mission was. I don't know what is it like for now in the nonprofit space, but at least before, I don't recall going through so many stages of interviews when it comes to like doing design work. No, and I don't know any other career where I have to prepare stuff in advance or have to use my brain during a meeting so you can test my technical skills. Those are things that I don't find I had to do when I worked in management before. I feel like, at least in the spaces that I was, a lot of my interviews consisted of just me, like first or second stage meeting with my immediate manager and maybe like an executive. So I guess if I were to give anyone any advice, like go back to the video if you're watching this in the future, and go back to my initial advice where I said, make sure you don't quit your job and make sure you have money saved up. That's practical advice. And building on top of that, and this is going to be a cliche, you're going to hate like hearing people tell you all the time when you ask for advice, but it's very true. Like networking does help a lot. It's the difference between like you getting in the door and you like not even getting like a chance to even like tell your story and and represent yourself. So Networking is important, and just know that some people have just the advantage over you. Some people will like have been in this space for a while. Their parents will be in this space for a while, and so they'll always have the referral. So if you come from like I came from a lower income neighborhood, and I came from a single family home, and so I was never gonna have that access, and that's something I realized that I had to re-up and like figure out on my own. But like once you find your people, especially like Code for Chicago, I've met so many people that kind of had a similar life experience like me. And when you reach out for help, they're really willing to help you out, and vice versa. I'll be willing to help them out as well. So I found the brigade to be a really important part of like my networking process as well, because you kind of like do meet people that are kind of like-minded, just like you. Popcorn Cade.
Snaps for Joseph. Yeah. Samesies. A lot of that, I totally agree. Networking, literally all of my second round interviews have been through people that I cold called on LinkedIn and just started a conversation with. Pretty much all my other applications were thanks, but no thanks. And that's like 10 applications a day at one point. So, definitely reach out and network. It's going to help you so much. Also, as like, corny and cliche, as one might say, is consume as much media as you can, right? Read as much as you can, listen to podcasts, all that stuff. Follow UX, UI, if that's what you're into. Design accounts on Instagram to keep your daily, inspiration going. Just really inundate yourself with that sector and whatever field you want to work in, whether it's tech, whether it's design. I don't know. Yeah, that's my 2 cents, my popcorn.
Speaking of cliches, a thing that we've done on the podcast for pretty much every episode, so much that you could maybe consider it cliche in itself, is having some space to do concluding thoughts for the folks that happen to be on the program for that episode. So for each of you, and for this conversation, what would you like folks to leave it thinking about?
Did you think we were funny? Did we entertain you? Was this worth hour of your time? It's so hard. I can't help it. If you can't tell, I do comedy on the side. If you can't tell by me like trying to get everyone's attention. And I do a lot of clowning work too. So a lot of what I do is like looking at people's facial reactions or like listening to them. And this is so hard, Ryan, because you feel like you're talking into a black hole. But I hope you can get a sense of like, if you're not looking for work right now, like know that it's I've talked to so many people in a similar situation like me. It's just so hard, and everyone is like trying their best out there. And I think that's the only thing I can think about. I don't have anything that's practical and helpful.
Yeah, be nice to yourself. That's what I wrote down in my notes. So just be nice to yourself. Drink water. I prefer lime water, a little fresh lime water. That helps, And also, one of my mentors from General Assembly was really hit this over the head, and it's common in the industry, but pencils before pixels. I cannot tell you how many hours I've saved myself with that motto before I start designing. Design that stuff on paper before you start designing it on a screen. You'll be much more thankful with yourself.
I want to thank you both for taking the time to come on and do this little live taping thing. Thanks so much, Joseph and Cade.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us.
Cool. So that's the interview part. We've done a really nice job with the timing here. We have a few minutes at the end. Do folks have any like questions or comments, musings, things on their brain that they'd like to verbalize? I really thought I had more words that were synonymous with what I was saying. But yeah, anything folks would like to bring up or say?
Joseph, I would go to one of your open mic nights. You were both very entertaining. This was a great interview.
Thank you. I just need one person to like me. That's all I needed. Thank you, Tom.
I hope everyone listening with their video off also found it entertaining.
See, that's really like the secret trick to the podcast is that I am personally not that entertaining, so I just find like more entertaining people to be my foil.
What, Ryan? How did you keep this under time? I'm very like surprised that we were able to finish before 2. It's very impressive. I don't know how that happened.
So this goes back to that bullet about as you make your agenda, think about how long it takes to do things. So I have like a pretty good I have like a mental model for about how long it takes to get through each question for 2 people from some kind of past experience with doing these interviews. So I then,
That's amazing.
knowing that, picked a number of questions that would fit in the like 25-minute-ish I thought we'd have.
That's amazing. Kudos to you.
Rocked it. Time
It's like
management.
a meeting magician.
I mean, you had that picture best meeting ever. So
Yeah.
hashtag.
Hashtag. Oh, the silence thing.
Cool. Then if there is anything else, Veronica, I think I'll hand it back to you in case there's any shop things you need to say with folks as we get to the end here.
Thanks, Ryan. No, nothing really on the schedule for shop things, but if you are interested in looking at notes from this session, make sure you check out Discourse, where notes from each of these sessions will be posted. Thank you so much, Ryan, for leading us in this session. Thank you, Kate and Joseph, for your participation. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And I will give everyone a couple minutes before heading to your next session. So see you all soon.